What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kenny. If you like what we do and you want to hear new true crime cases every single week, please subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends because, we release them every single week. Today, we have something really interesting to me, so I'm not going to take too long to get into it. For some reason, if I don't cover, there's a lot to this. If I don't cover everything that you know about the case, start a discussion in the comments. And also, I'm going to leave a couple pretty cool links to some really in-depth information about this case in the description, so check those out as well. So today we are talking about Paris Lee Bennett. On February 5th, 2007, Charity Lee was working late at her job as a waitress at Buffalo Wild Wings. She had left her 13-year-old son, Paris, and her 4-year-old daughter, Ella, at home with a babysitter. Paris was able to convince the babysitter to go home for the night and leave Paris and his sister at home. After all, he was 13 years old. Surely he could watch over his 4-year-old sister, right? I'm not saying you need to be a genius to convince a babysitter to go home, but I want to get this out of the way. Paris is said to have been a gifted child, and he had an IQ of 141. And I feel like his IQ was brought into this while researching it a ton. So I'm not going to go into it too much, maybe a little bit, but not as much as a lot of the articles do. The babysitter was a 21-year-old Hardin-Simmons University student. The babysitter says that she and the kids got Chinese food and watched the animated version of Alice in Wonderland before she put Ella to sleep and Paris went to work on homework in his bedroom. It was around 10 p.m. that Paris convinced the babysitter to go home. After the babysitter left, Paris grabbed a knife from the kitchen. He went to his little sister's room, began beating and sexually assaulting her, and eventually strangled and stabbed her to death. He claimed that his original plan was to murder his mom in order to punish her for various things that we will get into. However, after he killed his sister, he said that it was much harder to kill someone than he had thought it would be. And I think what he means by this is physically. It was physically harder to kill someone. And he's 13 years old at this time, and he was about the same size as his mother was. And so he would later state that he didn't think that he could actually physically kill his mom. He also thought that his mom losing her daughter, especially being killed by her own son, was probably punishment enough. It was punishment that would last forever. Paris also claimed that he killed his sister to cover up the fact that he had sexually abused her. He says that he started to sexually abuse her, and the more turned on he became, the more violent he became, and it kind of snowballed from there. This would end in the death of Ella and the ultimate satisfaction for Paris. In the end, Paris stabbed Ella 17 times. But a lot of the stab wounds didn't go deep. The stab wounds were very shallow and methodical, more meant for pain than to kill. The reasoning that Paris gives for the murder changes over the years, but one thing seems for certain. He wanted his mother to suffer. But why? Well, why is that? Well, that's a question that we're, going to try to solve today. So Charity was pregnant with Paris when she was 18 years old. Shortly before she got pregnant, however, she had been in a really rough spot in her life. A year before, she had been addicted to heroin, and she had met Paris's dad a year or so into sobriety. She really didn't like being sober, and she didn't like dealing with all the issues in her life without drugs. And at one point, she told herself that if she wasn't happy in 3 months, that she would OD and kill herself. Now, I've seen multiple sources say 1 month and 3 months. Both of them were interviews by her, so it's kind of hard to say which was correct. Either way, at the time of her life, she definitely wasn't doing very well, and she was ready to end it. But during that time, she became pregnant with Paris. She claims that Paris is the one who saved her life. Paris's dad wasn't in the picture when he was born, and as he left Charity shortly after she became pregnant. He came back in their lives when Paris was 17 months old, but Charity knew something was off with him immediately. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia with audible and visual hallucinations. So again, why was Paris so angry with his mother, and why did he want her to suffer? When Paris was 9 years old, Ella was born, and for the first 9 years of his life, Paris had been an only child and was giving a lot of attention. All of a sudden, he had no spotlight anymore, and when Paris was 12 years old and Ella was 3, Charity relapsed and started doing cocaine. Things in the house and family were really rough during this time. Paris was forced into a role he had never been in, and Paris was forced to attempt to hold the family together. This caused a lot of resentment in his mind, and Paris claimed that this was not solely the reason that he did what he did, but that it was just one piece of the puzzle. And remember, also, I'm not saying that Charity's relapse was a big part of this crime, but Paris is just saying that it was a part of the reason he did it. After Paris killed his sister, he called a school friend and talked on the phone for 6 minutes. And I want to make a disclaimer that I can't find a ton of information about this phone call. What I did find was basically he called to say what he had done. I also read that he called and told the friend that he was going to do it. Remember, this was after he'd already done it, so it's kind of, I mostly believe that he called the friend and kind of talked about what he had just done. But after this phone call, regardless, he called 911. This 911 call, like many others, is pretty bizarre to listen to. He says that he accidentally killed his sister, but that he knows she is dead. He is crying and freaking out and says he stabbed her lots of times. And on the call, he says he feels really messed up and that he was hallucinating and he thought his sister was a demon. In his interviews, he says that after it happened, it felt like a dream. He left the room where he had stabbed Ella, her bedroom, and came back in and saw that it was real and realized what he had actually just done. And honestly, just YouTube search Paris Lee Bennett 911 call. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty bizarre. And I have to give props to the 911 operator who was on the phone with him because I think she did a really good job trying to help him. On the 911 call, the 911 operator walked Paris through CPR attempts. The operator had to really convince Paris that it was necessary. Later, though, evidence would point to CPR having never taken place. And this was proven basically when they found Ella on the ground. She wasn't on her back, and there was no evidence that he had been pressing down on her at all with compressions. There was no excess blood on the floor. There was just no evidence of it at all. Charity says that the way Paris was crying on the 911 call was not how Paris really cried, and it was all acting. And she says at first that she believed him about it, but eventually she realized that it was all an act. 4 months before the crime, in November of 2006, Paris had an incident with a knife. This happened when the family was staying at Charity's mother's ranch in Seymour, Texas. We haven't talked about Paris's grandmother yet, whose name is Kyla, but she will come into this story and play a very important role in it. On this day, Paris was playing with Ella and another girl. Paris broke a toy that they were playing with, and when Ella got upset, Charity put Paris in timeout. When Charity wasn't looking, Paris grabbed a kitchen knife and ran out the door. Charity and her mother ran out the door chasing him, and Paris was waving the knife around at them and may have tried to stab Charity, although various articles disagree on this point. Kyla got the knife from Paris, and Charity wrapped her arms around him to calm him. They took him to the Red River Hospital, which was a psychiatric facility. His grandmother offered to pay for a long stay in the psychiatric hospital. The doctors told Charity that Paris had homicidal tendencies, but Charity claimed that she was not getting enough information from the doctors. For this reason, Charity decided to take Paris home. It wasn't until a year later, months after Ella's murder, that Charity was able to get her hands on the full report from the hospital. It showed that Paris was obsessed with the idea of shooting and killing. And this is something that Charity would certainly dwell on, but she says that she has no regrets over it. And so pretty much, like I said, that doctors told Charity that Paris had homicidal tendencies, but it's sort of hard to know exactly when this was. It's hard to know because she says that the doctors weren't giving her very much information about what was going on inside the hospital, and that's why she decided to take Paris home. But it's sort of hard to understand what exactly she was feeling at that time. And remember, this is only 4 months before Paris killed Ella. So this is a huge thing. I mean, she says that she has no regrets about it. And it's hard to know if you would or not. But me personally, I think that would be probably I don't know. I think it would be a huge regret in my mind if I hadn't, left him in there. And, everything about this case in this episode it's pretty different, but we're about to take a turn into an even more unusual aspect of it. when we talk about Paris's grandmother. Now, she was well off, and she owned a farm and owned a company called Bennett Trucking, which she started with Charity's father. Charity and her mother had a very strained relationship throughout her life. It was said to be good when she was young, but when she became a teenager, things got really rough and it was very up and down with their relationship. Their life growing up had a pretty violent start. When Charity was 6 years old, her father, Bobby, was found dead in his home in Atlanta, Georgia. I say his home because at the time they were separated, quote unquote, because about 57 hours before his murder, they had remarried. So it's sort of hard to understand where exactly that timeline is because it's only, 2.5 days or something that they had remarried before Bobby was murdered. That's Bobby and Kyla. And so this was in the summer of 1980. And, when they got remarried, technically, if anything happened to Bobby, Kyla would stand to take over the Bennett trucking business off for herself. And with these sort of things, Kyla was obviously going to be the prime suspect in Bobby's death. It's just the way it is. It's how these things work. Even if there was no circumstantial evidence pointing to her at all, she would be a suspect if anything was weird at all. And Bobby's death looked like an execution. So, Kyla claimed that Bobby had been dealing with people in the criminal world. And that was in the form of drug trafficking and boosting cars and so on. A month after Bobby's death, Kyla was arrested and charged with murder. Prosecutors would say in court that Kyla hired a hitman, and she had talked to a truck driver at length about killing Bobby. It was a widely covered trial at the time, especially in the area. It was pretty big news. So after 6 weeks of trial, Kyla was acquitted by the jury. Kyla says that the death of Charity's father didn't really affect Charity very much because he wasn't in her life as often as most dads should be anyways. It was the teasing that would affect Charity more. Children were teasing Charity about the fact that her mom had supposedly killed her dad. And I'm sure that's something that was going on. I mean, yeah, it was a huge thing in that area. It was very publicized, and everyone knew about it. So I'm sure a lot of the parents were talking openly, as you do, in front of their kids, and so the kids knew about what was happening. And you know how kids are; they're cruel, and they would tease her about this, which is a really messed up thing to be teased about. But it is what it is. And Charity spent her life hearing from her mother that the men he was connected to killed him, and that her mother was framed. And after Ella died, Charity began to have second thoughts. She started doing more research, and she eventually came to the conclusion that her mother probably killed her father. Kyla, Paris's grandmother, and Paris's aunt claimed that they knew something was wrong with Paris from very, very young age. Shortly after, 3 years old or something like that. He was never very affectionate, never showed a lot of emotions, and that got worse when Ella was born. His aunt said that she was scared of him, but couldn't exactly figure out why. And Paris's grandmother said that she believed that Paris was showing real signs of aggression, and that she believed he could take it out on Charity, but that she never thought that he would actually take it out on Ella. One story that Charity says happened that when you look back on it could have been a sign that he would become what he became was they were at, so Charity and Paris, this is before Ella was born, I believe, were at Kyla's house, Paris's grandmother's house. And on their front porch, there was a really big drop-off with a bunch of stairs that led down, but you could drop off like 20 or 30 feet or something like that. And Charity came outside to the porch, and Paris was throwing frogs off of the porch, and they would die when they hit the ground. And of course, she got on to him about this. She told him, obviously, that it was wrong and that they were being hurt and they were dying. And they found one on the ground that wasn't dead yet, and it was suffering. And she said that they needed to put it out of its misery. And she says that Paris wasn't about to do that he felt bad for the frog. So it's kind of a conflicting story as, you think, okay, well, there's this kid who's just torturing and hurting and killing frogs, but at the same time, when it comes down to it, he didn't actually want to kill the one that was suffering. So it's kind of, take that how you will. It's kind of an interesting story that she would share. Following the murder of his sister, Paris stated that his grandmother was very cold and collected, and that she reminded him of himself. And that wasn't how he felt about Charity. Charity wasn't cold and collected. She's an interesting person, but she was very emotional. She was very outgoing, and she really wasn't like her mother or like her son. And at one point, Kyla stated that she thought everyone in her family was a good manipulator, and that includes Charity, but it was even more so for Paris and herself. And she even says Ella, at her age, was a good manipulator as well. And then she stated something kind of weird. She said that she doesn't manipulate as much anymore because she doesn't have anyone to manipulate. And this is during the documentary, and which you should watch, by the way. It's interesting. It doesn't give all the information, but it gives pretty much all the good information. But she looks at the camera and she says that she doesn't have anyone to manipulate, including a jury. And she's like, her eyes go right to the camera when she says this. And yeah, no, that's crazy to me. To me, that's her saying that she was manipulating the jury during her trial for the death of her husband. And here's the thing, Paris's father was a paranoid schizophrenic, and his grandmother is most likely a sociopath herself. And you can kind of tell that Charity is much different than her mother and much different than Paris. And you can tell that her grandmother, Paris's grandmother rather, was probably a sociopath. Just the way that she talks and just some of the stories that she would say. One of which was whenever Charity was 17 years old and she was addicted to heroin, her mother gave her $100 and said, you can either use this $100 to find a place to stay and get clean, or you can use it on one last score and overdose and die. And she kicked her out. Which, we don't have a ton of backstory to that. It's kind of hard to 100, who knows if she was pushed to her limit at that point. But that is something that, as a father, it's kind of hard to understand how you could ever do that to your kid who is suffering from an addiction. So, something to bring up is the underwear incident with Paris and his mother. And this is pretty interesting. He was caught with her underwear in his room, and he admitted to her that he had been wearing it. And he claims that he wanted to know what it was like to be a girl, and specifically what it was like to be Charity. And this is very interesting. Charity claims that she had nothing really. She's not homophobic or transphobic or anything like that, but it was something that she did want him to talk to a therapist about. And the day before he was to have the appointment with that therapist was the day he killed Ella. So it's kind of hard to know exactly what could have come from maybe him talking to a professional about some of the ideas that he was having in his head. Again, nothing wrong necessarily with doing that, especially if you're just you're at that age where you're experimenting with things. And when you see Charity talk about stuff like that, you can tell that she's a very open person, that she doesn't seem to have a bunch of hate in her heart. And I think that goes to show, pretty well. And, to go more into that, this is the question that I want. If you're still listening to this, I want you to go into the comments and I want to talk about this. I want to see what your perception is on, or what your opinion is on how you would handle something like this happening. Because obviously no one can understand. No one knows exactly how you would react to this. But, Charity gets a lot of hate. A lot of hate from people in her community, it's going to happen. People are going to blame her for what happened. And, you can make an argument, a decent argument that could blame her for part of this. It's kind of hard to say. But this entire time, she got really, really close with Paris after this happened, and, for the first few years, she decided pretty much right away that she did not want to lose both of her children. And to this day, she visits her son every single month. And, there were times throughout their relationship after Ella was killed that she couldn't deal with it and she needed to take a break. Sometimes she would take a break from dealing with Paris for up to a year, she says. But she says that she can never, ever stop loving Paris. And she says that she never did, and she never has, and she never will. And it's hard to say how you should do that because a lot of people are surprised whenever she says this, But at the same time, she gave birth to Paris and that's her son. And he did something that is so, so terrible, but how does she let him go forever as well? And, I really, like I said, she gets a lot of heat from a lot of people. And sometimes she kind of comes off as a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit narcissistic. Just a little bit. I mean, obviously Paris is like the biggest sociopath, narcissist ever, right? But, and maybe she's a little bit, but she also comes off as a very, very sweet, intelligent, caring person. And I think that really shows whenever you look at how she still loves Paris and how she still visits him, and they talk on the phone all the time. It's pretty interesting. So let me know how you think you would deal with this situation, or what you think about Charity, and how she reacted to it as well. So 6 years after Paris killed Ella, Charity had another child named Phoenix. And Phoenix was born with a heart condition and had to have open heart surgery at only 6 days old, which is really sad. And, when Charity told Paris this news, she said he cried like he had never cried before, because after everything he did, he says that she didn't deserve to go through more heartache. And Charity says that having Phoenix makes her feel happy again. And okay, I'm doing this episode by myself, and I kind of wish Stefan was with me today because I really want to talk about this. But, it's because it's so interesting. Like when you look at interviews of Paris and you look at how Paris grew up, he was 13 years old whenever he killed his sister. And so he spent, the last now 13, 14 years, this is 2007, in juvenile and adult prison now. And he says that he is a much different person than he was whenever he killed her. And he says that he could never hurt anyone again. But whenever he says this, he says it in a way that makes it seem like he would only not do that because he doesn't want to go back to prison. And don't get me wrong, Paris is a sociopath. He's the definition of a sociopath. He never talks about how he feels bad about Ella not being alive. A lot of times he talks about how he doesn't want to be in prison and how bad prison is. And again, he says if he gets out, he'll never hurt anyone again. But he is specifically quoted as saying it's because he doesn't want to go back to prison. And he's never been able to show emotion like that when he was a kid, and especially after he killed Ella. But with all that said, the way he talks to his mom now as an adult is really interesting to listen to. In the documentary, there's a phone call between Paris and Charity, and Charity's driving, and Charity has her son Phoenix in the backseat, strapped into the chair, and Paris is coming through Bluetooth, and he's calling, from the prison, obviously. And he's talking very, very lovingly with Phoenix. And he's talking with him like, I love you, I'm sending you letters. Maybe tomorrow night, if you're watching this movie, I think it's playing in the prison today or tomorrow at the same time. So if I can watch it here, you can watch it there. Maybe we're watching it together. And the way he speaks to Phoenix is just so interesting. And the way, that he speaks to Charity now is pretty interesting as well. But this next part we're going to go over kind of goes to show that he can go back and forth. Because while in prison, Paris, he asked for comic books and graphic novels that were very violent in nature. Watchmen was one of the graphic novels that he wanted. And his grandmother, who is also in, communication with Paris a lot, did send some of these graphic novels. And, if you look at these graphic novels, yeah, he probably shouldn't be getting them because they're full of, images, art of people being murdered. And Charity would respond to this by blocking her mother's ability to send Paris any type of reading material. And this was answered by a lawsuit from Paris and his grandmother. The suit was trying to make sure that Charity's parental guardianship over Paris was taken away, with his grandmother taking her place. And the lawsuit was dropped after Charity threatened to never speak to him again. And if you look at the letters that Paris was sending Charity during this time, you can see how narcissistic Paris is. He's insulting her. He's saying, it doesn't matter, who cares? I don't care about you anymore. I'm glad I hurt you. A bunch of stuff. And then right once she threatens to never speak to him again, which I think that she would probably, carry out with that promise, he backs down off the suit and takes her back in again because I think that he's worried about not having someone real to speak to again. Like I said, his grandmother's a sociopath, so she's probably not the best person for him to talk to all the time, right? So something we haven't gone into yet very specifically, 6 months after the death of Ella, Paris pleaded guilty to capital murder and received a sentence of 40 years in prison. I probably should have said that earlier before talking about all of the stuff in prison, but it is what it is. He served his first 5 years at the Texas Department of Juvenile Justice State School until he was relocated to an adult prison where he will spend the rest of his sentence. The defense team wanted to get Paris off with as little time as possible, but Charity did not want that. She understood that he was a danger to society, and I think that that is another unique thing about her and about how she approaches this case. It is rare, from what I have seen, that a parent of a murderer would do this. In almost every case I ever come across, the parents, even if they understand they did something bad, they almost always want to get them off with as little time as possible. It's just the way it is. And she already lost she already lost her daughter. I feel like in most parents, in reality, what they would do is try to get him off and then try to figure it out from there. But she did not want that. She understood that he was a danger and that he needed to go somewhere. But with that said, she did not really want him to necessarily go to prison. She wanted him to get help, most of all. And, during the 6 months after Ella's death, she had really done her research on what was going to happen to him if he went to prison. And she believed that he would be killed because he had killed a child. And, they don't take too kindly to that in prison. So, yeah, there's a lot going on with this case that I don't feel I have the time this week to get into. Some things I can think of right now, one real fast is that, when he first went to the juvenile center, he was very disruptive. He would get into fights. He would manipulate the people that were there working with him, and he would manipulate other kids in the center as well. And, like I said, I touched on how smart he was. And a lot of times we get a lot of crap for talking about IQ. I don't really know why. But he was extremely intelligent. And if you watch his interviews, you can tell that this is the case. When he was in 6th grade, the teachers said that he had a vocabulary of a university student. He says that teachers, that he was the most intelligent child that teachers had ever had. Multiple teachers would say this as well. Like I said, he was tested at an IQ of 141, and a lot of times IQ, it's sort of like, what does that actually mean? But he was extremely intelligent. And so that's something I didn't get as into as maybe I could have. This is an episode where maybe there could be a part 2 where me and Stefan talk about it. I think that might be interesting. But regardless, I would really love to hear, especially with this episode, what you guys think in the comment section below. What do you think about, what how Charity has reacted forever to everything that that is going on, and how she has dealt with Paris. And also, one thing I meant to get into: Paris will be up for parole in 2027, which is not very long from now. Charity has had multiple doctors and multiple professionals tell her that she needs to change her name and go into hiding, because when he gets out, even though he claims he would never hurt anyone again, she now has another son, Phoenix, and multiple professionals believe that Paris at some point will feel vengeance and want to hurt Charity or Phoenix, once he's out. And, I doubt that he'll get out on parole in 2027. If he serves his maximum time, he will be released when he's 53 years old. So, and something else I would like for you guys to comment on below is, what do you think about his sentencing for a 13-year-old? Do you think it was too light? Do you think he should have gotten life in prison? Or do you think that he maybe deserves to be paroled in the next, 10 or 20 years or something, or in 2027? I don't really personally know what I believe. I seriously doubt he'll be paroled in 2027. And honestly, I'm leaning more towards he shouldn't be paroled in 2027, because he obviously still has, he's going to forever be a sociopath, I think, and a narcissist. And he's probably always going to have homicidal tendencies. I think it's the main reason why he wanted, violent books sent to him in prison. Yeah. So again, there's a bunch of stuff I didn't get into today. I really wish that, we release these episodes every week, and writing and researching them is pretty difficult, and it takes time. And so I can't release an hour and a half long episodes every single week. So this is the best, but I think we did get a lot of stuff. And whatever I missed, please put in the comment section below. This is really one I would actually love to discuss with you guys. So thanks. And if you're still listening to this, subscribe to consider subscribing to our Patreon. It's only $3 a month. Typically you'll get episodes early. You get some extra content once or twice a month. And also you'll get to join our private Patreon only Discord, where we talk about everything in the world, which is pretty cool. Or at least it might be cool. I don't know. And it's only $3 a month. So join if you want to. That'd be cool. Like and subscribe to the video. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.